partnership where some governments are in, companies, a lot of companies and sector federations, and then civil society and NGOs, and then the knowledge community. So altogether, we are stimulating the circular economy, what is one of 7 transitions in Flanders. And we are working on innovation, but not only on technical innovation, but also on new business models, new ways to participate. This is our partnership. As you see, the group, for example, also the Society for a Better Environment, but also the Association of Flemish Cities and Municipalities are joining this group. And we are working with a little operation team to support the initiatives. But all together, we form the transition space, as we call it. This is the first slide on circular economy that we created to explain exactly what the linear economy and the recycling economy, where we are now, has to change towards a circular economy. It's a very simple slide, but it says a lot, I think. We are not only working on materials. Before, some years ago, we were focusing on closing material loop, but now we are trying to work also on energy, biomass, water and space, because you also have some problems if you don't close those cycles. So this is our goal. We're not there yet, but we are working on it. And how are we doing that? Through networking, building up knowledge, stimulating innovation, creating labs and experiments, and then the lessons learned in those experiments, we try to change the policy and embed it in the regulation and in the financial proceedings, etc. Each 2 years, we are focusing on 3 topics, and for 2017 and 2018, it's circular procurement, circular city, and circular businesses. And today, we are here for the circular procurement. Why did we choose for circular procurement? Because we already had a lot of front runners who came to us and said we have good products or good services that are circular, but we don't have any clients yet. And as you see that public procurement is already such a big issue, but the whole procurement prospect is already, you see the number, I'm not going to tell it in English, it's too difficult. But anyway, as a motivation, it's just so important that we focus on the circular procurement as a strategic team. So you can manage a lot, you can change a lot when you focus on the procurement aspect. The 4 initiating organizations was Circular Flanders, together with the Society for a Better Environment, The Shift, who is an organization bringing together companies who want to invest in sustainability, and then the Association of Flemish Cities and Municipalities. So it's a group that is working on different stakeholders to make sure that the lessons learned from circular procurement are relevant for all those stakeholders. What is necessary? The willingness to learn and to experiment. So we want to try, because when you work together, you learn and you see what the bottlenecks are. And of course, we were inspired by the approach of the Netherlands, who already had a Green Deal, and we wanted to see if it was also something to do in Flanders, if it would work. Our goals, 3 main goals. First, to stimulate experiments. Just doing it, because only talking about it is not enough. Knowledge building. For each sector, we learn now how circular procurement has an influence, how you can translate it to those sectors. And then demonstrate the feasibility. Especially for public procurement, many people were a bit anxious to try it. but now just by being in the Green Deal, everyone tries to do it. In June last year we started, and it was an enormous success. We had 80-60 participants, but also we focused on the supporting organizations, because we saw in the Netherlands that there were some consultants helping the procurers, but in Flanders it didn't exist. There were no consultants specialized in circular procurement, so we had to convince them and also the associations of several sectors to learn together with the procurers. Now we are with 100 participants and 52 supporting organizations, and you see that it's a good mix between businesses, governments and others, and those others are also NGOs or hospital, for example, those things. These are the participants. So you see it's is it working properly? Don't you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
yes, okay, I saw
see the screen.
I saw a note that someone doesn't hear me. Okay. You see big companies like IKEA or BASF, but also Nieuw Stedelijk is a theater. You have also a bank, an organization for the youth, Spadel, a big company, the media TV from Flanders. So you see it's a good mix, and it's exactly that mix that makes it possible to learn at different aspects. What is the engagement, the commitment? Each participant procurer has to perform at least 2 circular procurements. So it's really pilot projects. They have to buy something, a product or a service on a circular way. And the supporting organizations need to create two services, to supporting actions like a visit of companies or a training session, etc. And approach is learning by doing. How do we do that? Each year we have 4 offline inspiration days. In the morning we invite speakers, and in the afternoon they discuss in a little group. We also have an online platform. We give them access to tools and instruments. We organized the 23rd of May our first Buyer Meet Supplier, which was a big success. And we will have, after 2 years, 200 best practices where we can learn from. And the problems, the bottlenecks will be listed, and possibility to attack those problems. This is from our Inspiration Day. So we focus on a specific theme. First, the ambitions, how to set up ambitions and how to work with functional needs. Then on the chain cooperation, how do you start with that? How do you go into dialogue with the markets? How to make your specifications? How to measure your impact then? So in the morning it's always such one of those teams with specialists, with experts, and then in the afternoon we call them circular procurement teams, and it's a group of 5 or 6 people who have a joint problem, specific challenge, and together they try to find solutions for it. Then our online platform, because we know that for procurers it's difficult, they don't have a lot of time, and it's not always possible to come to our learning days. So everyone can learn. The knowledge part is transmitted through this online learning platform. It's possible to view it on your mobile phone, so everyone can look at those here, the videos, webinars, the tools. You can look at it at your mobile phone, or you can work on it on your computer, and you get, you don't see it here, but you get an overview of how you are doing compared to others. So it's a bit of a game also. Then the 23rd of May, we organized our first Biomed Supplier, which was a big success. Here you see the book is free to download on our website, and it gives examples from different sectors, which products and services are already existing in Flanders that are circular. We started with the plenary part, small, but just to give some information. And then there was the market dialogue, which was, you don't see it anymore. It was a discussion specific for a specific market, like ICT or building sector. And then some suppliers could also have a pitch. And then you also had a B2B match where everyone could meet and discuss. And this was our market launch, where every supplier had a stand to show what they are doing. And then, of course, the monitoring is very important to help the procurers set out their ambitions. We made an overview. It's only in Dutch for the moment. So you can see, for example, reduction of materials. That is my ambition. Then you have several strategies to work on that ambition. For example, share within the company. In big companies, that's possible. Or rent or peer-to-peer sharing. Or reuse. Or make sure that if you buy something, there's at least material in as possible. Or less production waste. So you can have those different ambitions, and then they choose themselves to which ambition they work and which strategy they will use. And then as an extra, we also launched a call when for some difficult or challenging pilots, it was necessary to hire an expert or a legal advisor, and therefore we foreseen some money, and people could send in projects, and 11 projects received some money to work on the legal or other problems. This is what we did in 2017, so our circular procurement deal. It's a cooperation between two ministers, which gave us some money. And then in the project calls, we also had a call on circular business and circular city. So in total, we supported 70 companies or organizations. For green deals, as we had experience now for procurement, we are also looking to use this form for other green deals, but it's always scientific research, the knowledge part, and then on-site experiments, and then market implications and policy implications. So we learn from the scientific part and the experiments, and we use those lessons learned to improve the market and the policy. So next year this year we are going to start with a construction green deal, and next year on plastics. I hope that I was within the time.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ecolabelled. I just check if there are any questions. Juliana, can you see them on the presentation?
No, not really. I cannot see on the chat.
Okay. No, then thanks really very much for this presentation.
Sorry,
yes.
Actually, there's someone who raised their hand. I think we'll try to unmute them. Nikolai, hi. Can you speak? I see now. Hello? Yeah, now we can hear you.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Oh, is it okay now?
Yes, it's okay. And please introduce yourself briefly so that the others understand.
Okay, Nikolai from the Association of Environmental Experts. And I just wanted to know who is behind this scheme, the NGO, the government, or the business? who was the founder, who was the motor, the engine of the process?
The regional government, but we started it really together. So I'm working for Circular Flanders, and I am paid by a government, the environmental government. But for this Green Deal, we really started from scratch together with those 4 organizations. So we, as a regional government, and then also the association, Society for a Better Environment Association, and then the shift for the businesses, and then the Association of Flemish Cities and Municipalities. So the 4, we came together and we started it.
Okay, good collaboration. Thank you.
Any other question? Otherwise, I would say we pass on to the next presentation, and afterwards we will have a bit of a discussion, if possible. So thanks again, Verle, for this presentation about showcasing what's going on in Flanders. I think this is very inspiring also for other areas in Europe. And now I would like to get back to our initial speaker, to Marvin Jones from Sustainable Global Resources from the UK. Thank you, Marvin, for being here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Peter. Yes.
Wonderful.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to attend the webinar today. I'm going to try and take control of the screen, if I can find a way of doing this.
Hi, Mary. Maybe I just remind you, on the top left, you see where this file, edit, share. The third option, share, you can just easily do that by the first option, clicking on my screen.
So, yeah, I'm not seeing the share coming up on the, oh yes, maybe my screen.
Yes, exactly.
I see that my mic is still on. Perhaps it's better to mute me.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, welcome everybody, and apologies again for the little bit of a technical hiccup. I'll be talking to you for the next 15 minutes or so just around some of the high-level concepts linking sustainable public procurement to delivering the circular economy benefits. And what I'll be doing is using some of the examples we've been working on throughout a number of European projects. So happy to talk about those in more depth at the end of the talk. Just to go back and rehearse around the circular economy, as everybody hopefully is really familiar now, we have a linear economy model that's been working pretty efficiently and becoming more efficient in that model approach over the last 350 years since industrialization, of taking materials, making them into products, using those products through demand, through procurement, and then disposing of them at the end of their lifetimes. What we're talking about with regards to procurement in particular, when we're talking about linking procurement into delivering the circular economy model, is to try and get rid of that, is to be able to think about the opportunities for using the procurement cycle as a whole, the life cycle approach to procurement, not just the immediate part of purchasing products for use, but being able to use procurement as an approach that then enables those benefits that we get from the circular economy to actually be accelerated and drawn through from the use of public procurement spending. And the reason it's worthwhile thinking about that whole life approach is very simply because there are very significant benefits attached to the circular economy. We've got a lot of sources of information now, both theoretical sources and also practical sources, that are showing that whichever country is looking at it, whichever way that you look at it, the European benefits of circular economy mean that there are positive impacts on GDP. There are positive impacts on the overall economic value of gross value added, and there are positive impacts on jobs. And that is all in addition to the positive impacts that you get in terms of the mitigation of environmental impacts from the results of sustainable consumption and production. And of course, procurement has a massive role to play in not just enabling that to happen, but also accelerating that. And this slide that I'm showing you now on the screen shows that we're in a progression over time. We don't stand still, whatever we're doing, whether it's purchasing, whether it's consuming, whether it's aging in my case. None of us stand still. And what we've seen through public procurement is the progression from purchasing simply to obtain goods and services through to promoting purchasing and procurement to delivering more sustainable products and services and processes, and then moving forward into using procurement in a much more strategic way to create performance-based or functional area specification-based collaborative approaches. And the progression on from that is in terms of circularity, using a multi-life cycle approach to procurement to enable those circular economy benefits to come through. And this example that I'm showing you through is a real-world example. It's from the Netherlands, but it's actually one that's replicated in a number of countries in Europe. Obviously, being from the UK, we've had a similar sort of progression over a similar timescale through from 2003 to 2015. What we're not doing necessarily so much now is linking our procurement in the UK into the circular benefits, but other countries have taken that on, countries like Belgium, countries like the Netherlands, Finland, and again up in the Scandinavian regions, Denmark, and even countries like Latvia now are looking at delivering circular economy through procurement. So it's not just a Northern European thing, it's across Europe as a whole. And fundamentally, all of this is simply about improving the professionalism of the procurement service within any organisation, be that a private sector organisation or a public sector organisation. Again, why are we doing this? There's lots of opportunities for using procurement to drive through those circular economy benefits. And this slide is simply showing that, again, it's not just about the purchasing aspect, using sustainable public procurement to look at where things have come from, what they're made out of, what they're packaged in, but also to think about how we're going to use them. One of the big aspects of the circular economy is actually improving utilization rates, and this is particularly important when we're talking about categories, for example, like construction and like transport, where the utilization rates of the products and the services that are offered in those categories are actually quite low in the public sector. But crucially, again, it's about what happens to it when we've finished using it, whether that's at end of life or whether, as is more often the case, whether it's first life. Are there opportunities to think of different ways of disposing at end of life? So circular procurement opportunities work all the way around the product life cycle, from enabling procurement to help facilitate better design of products, to help procurement incentivize a reduction of process waste, to optimize those lifetimes in terms of being able to use products and retain the embodied carbon within those products for longer, and then also to link that into the collection facilities, which then enable better options for remanufacturing and reuse before inevitably we think about recycling or extracting energy from the materials. So it's about closing those product and those material loops as best we can before we get to either recovering energy from waste or disposing into landfill. And the fundamental aspect here is that in order to drive those benefits, in order to get those, using procurement depends on policy being translated into practice. And this is something that you're probably all very familiar with in terms of the disconnect between policy setting and policy implementation. And circular procurement, linking into those environmental, economic, and those social benefits, creates a mechanism that enables those benefits then to be delivered across the piece. So the simple thing here is that circular procurement needs circular clients. It needs us to think about that whole life approach if we're going to actually deliver those benefits that we see within the conceptual reports from the likes of Ellen MacArthur and the Club of Rome. And a product is not circular until we make it circular. So again, it's emphasizing here the role that the customer, the client, has in actually creating the right conditions through procurement practice that allow the supply chain to then innovate and deliver more circular solutions. Examples here in the UK, in Wales, we have frameworks that are set up to deliver things like furniture. We've had to move outside of those frameworks because they're too restrictive and they're not enabling circular products to be offered or circular solutions to be offered. So a lot of the time we have to think about, are the processes that we're using in procurement sufficiently flexible that enable the market to actually do what it does best, which is deliver innovative solutions. And then once we've got those solutions, how we actually use those in the optimal way in order that we're getting best utilization, and then thinking about what happens further down the line in terms of how they're disposed of. And thankfully, it's not just all about the theory. There's, as you've already heard from Belgium, through the Green Deals initiative that they've got, and also through the Green Deals initiative in the Netherlands, that there are plenty of examples. And again, Ecolabelled have got enormous database of case studies and examples that demonstrate different aspects of not just sustainable public procurement, but circularity, depending on where you start, whether you're starting at the front end with food about waste prevention, or whether you're looking at opportunities for second and even third life through remanufacturing and through reuse in the electricals and in the furniture. And even in textiles now, again, under the Dutch Green Deal Circular Procurement Initiative, they and the European Life ECAP, that's the European Textiles Action Plan project, looking at creating circular fibers, so bringing textiles back into use as textiles, so for example using polo shirts, t-shirt tops that can be recycled back into recycled fibers that then go back into new polo shirts for the next year's workforce. Corporate wear is a very small area of textiles overall, of clothing overall, but it's an area in terms of market dominance that the public sector has an enormous influence and impact on. So again, it's looking within those categories, the public sector has got a significant impact potential on the market. Also looking at how mature that market is in terms of innovation, and transport is a good example here with the push towards lower emission vehicles and the push towards electric vehicles. But in terms of circularity, transport also provides the option for looking at more servicization, looking at increasing utilization, like the example in Germany, in Bremen, where there's a public-private car sharing initiative that has effectively increased the utilization rate of the cars that the public sector was using by over 100%. That has massive carbon savings. It also has massive infrastructure savings. The last thing you want is big vehicles sat there on the forecourts, not being used and depreciating and losing their value. And again, we come down to sectors and categories like construction, where we have enormous potential for improving circularity. And there's so much going on in terms of infrastructure and also in terms of building, because within construction, the lifetime of those projects being so long, there's a good understanding, a good maturity in terms of life cycle thinking. So there's some great examples already going on all around Europe and also outside of Europe in countries like North America and Toronto in Canada, also in America and in China as well. There's plenty, and in India, there's plenty of examples going on. There's lots to learn there and lots to actually think about opportunities to use procurement to deliver the circular economy benefits. So at that point, I'll stop there, and if anybody's got any questions, I'll be happy to answer those or pick them up later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marvin. let's see if there are any questions. So then please raise your hand or just write the question. Otherwise, we will have afterwards, after we go through all the presentation, we will have time for some discussion. Okay, I see there's a question from Latvia. Later we will hear when we unmute the participants. And the question is, would you like to say it, Juliana?
Hi, yes. It was sent by Audrone, and she wrote, okay, there was Latvia mentioned in the presentation, and she's asking what categories this country practice circular procurement.
Okay, well, at the moment in Latvia, the Ministry for the Environment is actually drafting a circular economy plan. And they've been in discussion. There's a project called, with the Baltic Sea Region's Interreg project called Circular Public Procurement, that is working with LEIF, L-E-I-F, the Environmental Fund, and also the Latvian Chamber of Commerce. The categories that we are looking at in Latvia at the moment, initially for piloting, but again there's opportunities across many others, are furniture, food, electricals, and construction. And the initial emphasis has been on furniture and construction refurbishment of school projects, because very fundamentally they're the ones that are coming up in the procurement pipeline. So we're working with municipalities around around Riga to look at the opportunities for embedding some circular procurement principles. When you talk about embedding principles in tenders and in procurements in any country, it really depends on where that country is in terms of its current practice. So again, a bit of baselining is required to understand what current practice is in terms of sustainable public procurement, and then what the next steps could be. It's no point trying to sort of take a model from Belgium or from the Netherlands and trying to plant it into Latvia if the markets for suppliers in Latvia are not capable of delivering that. So it's a balanced approach, and that's why the piloting in Riga and the municipalities in Riga is looking at what those opportunities are. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thanks. And actually, Audrone is from the Baltic Environmental Forum, Lithuania. Just to add to that, and maybe if she has further questions, you would be happy to contact, or you can. Yeah.
Okay. Then thank you, Marvin. I think there will be definitely also questions afterwards. These also from my side. I like the sentence: circular procurement needs circular clients. It needs both sides, and indeed, sometimes, especially being in Brussels, I have the impression that often circular economy, particularly in procurement and around innovation, often the language is Dutch. So I'm very glad that you brought also examples from other countries, like you mentioned Latvia, Germany, UK, to the show. But I think this is also something that we can discuss, how to kickstart it in other countries, or what are the things that are needed, or how could an NGO really kickstart it together with a public authority to bring in circular economy aspects in procurement. Maybe we can discuss that later. So I pass on to the next presentation, which will be on the insight on circular economy monitoring frameworks and on the GPP advisory group status, where EB, the European Environment Bureau, is involved. So I'm very glad to welcome Stefan Arditi, Policy Manager at EB in Brussels, and Blanca Morales.
So hello all, I hope you can hear me well. My name is Stefan. Oh.
We hear you well, Stefan, thank you.
Oh, you hear me? Okay, I was afraid I had not unmuted myself. So sorry for that. So it will be a two voices presentation. I will start about the need for monitoring green public procurement as part of the circular economy agenda. And then I will let my colleague Blanca report on the recent meeting in Copenhagen, because she was the representative there. So it's better that she speaks about that. So hopefully everyone can see the slide. Okay. So I'd like to start first with this. I mean, I'm not starting from a GPP perspective, but from a circular economy perspective. And from a circular economy perspective, of course, we had identified for long, not only for circular economy, for resource conservation policy, the role of green public procurement as creating a first market, as in a way, providing opportunities for innovative solutions. But I think what has changed in the recent year is that we realize that, in fact, green public procurement should not be like this kind of pilot experience or things that we try once and we never generalize. So the idea is that, in fact, green public procurement, sustainable public procurement, should be the new normal. And we can even challenge if it should be only the public side of procurement, or if we should not include in this new normal also what we call corporate procurement that could be reported as part of the corporate social responsibility strategy of companies, for example. So to my first, I would say, issue is to say we speak about green public procurement because there are some rules, but the potential may be even further unleashed if we speak about public and corporate public procurement that should become the new normal in a circular economy perspective. So this means that, in fact, public procurement should be monitored. I don't know what happened when I tried to change my slide, but all right, so you got it. And in fact, I don't know where you are, but there was recently a communication by the European Commission about what they call a monitoring framework for the circular economy. And as part of this monitoring framework, you know, they had to be very selective on the number of indicators they can really monitor. And you see that there is one which is dedicated to green public procurement. So the idea is that at your level, we should see how much public procurement are with green or sustainable, I would say, provision in the tender, and how they've been answered. And I think this, again, this idea of monitoring is extremely useful. And it's not new, because in fact it's a long story. I just extract some slides from an old report from 2011, okay, about the monitoring of the green public procurement in the EU and also at national level. And you could see that in 2011, of course, I can share the more the full report with you, but you could see, and I just extract these figures, that only half of the procurement were having a form of green aspect in them in 2011. Okay, and it was only on the 10 products and services that the European Commission had identified in 2008. But this long story, I think, is now taken much more seriously, and there is now a systematic, you know, report on national activities on green public procurement, including some form of counting, you know, the number of green public procurement at national level. And for example, in Italy, just to stress this, green public procurement is kind of mandatory. That means that in any public procurement, there should be some green criteria and an assessment and evaluation of the answer to the tenders according to green criteria. So this monitoring system is really, I think, growing, and I identify as a first very important hook for national campaigners to work on at national level to promote green public procurement, because of course they can then compare with other countries, but also identify in which sectors more efforts are needed, for example. And this idea has been termed, and I just mentioned here an article of a newspaper called Renewable Matter, fully dedicated to the bioeconomy, in fact, but that scrutinized for the first time a form of mapping according to how green the member states were. You can guess that it was done by an Italian person, and you see that Italy is the sole AAA country. But I mean, this idea lies because when you've got a form of ranking, providing we can really compare, then you create also a form of pressure on the national authority and even local authority to progress along the scale of this B to AAE in this example. And I think it's also very important for NGO campaigning on green public procurement to eventually consider this form of mapping to pressure national action. Finally, I want to remind something that you probably know all, is the fact that as part of our Sustainable Development Goals, to which the European Union and member states have committed to, there is number 12 SDG on responsible consumption and production. And if you see the target, 12.7 and the indicators, they are clearly related to policy on sustainable product public procurement. So in a way, for me, it's an additional hook to push toward green public procurement and even corporate public procurement as the new normal in our transition to a circular economy at your level, but also in our fulfillment of our sustainable development goals. I will now give the floor to my colleague Blanca, that will update you on the GPP advisory group, and then we can address your question at the end of the presentation.
Okay, I will now quickly share my screen. So can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So what I wanted to go through you is on the different updates of the Commission activities and some of the things that member states reported in the Green Public Procurement Advisory Group, and the ongoing upcoming criteria development processes, so which product groups the Commission is prioritizing at the moment. And I wanted to share with you an experience that I found very interesting from Copenhagen municipality, as they are now going or they have prioritized buying eco-label products in the for the different services that they provide. So as regards the Commission activities, I wanted to tell you, basically, the member states, the Commission has been until now focusing on developing green public procurement for different or criteria for different product groups, but member states have asked the Commission that they should, rather than focusing the resources mainly on developing those criteria, they should rather assist the member states into developing and promoting and enhancing the implementation of public procurement. So they have asked the Commission to reduce the number of product groups that they develop, simplify the process, and then provide them with guidance on how to use legally eco-label in the procurement tenders, how to overcome legal challenges, and also have a sort of a network or help desk network between the different member states. So what the Commission is doing is they now are revising the Green Public Procurement Training Toolkit. So they will provide this guidance on how to use eco-labels, and they are considering translations into the different languages. They are also considering trainings in 2019 and 2020 in different member states. So maybe that can also be for the benefit of NGOs. They have now a new framework for the GPP criteria development, which will be rather linked to when we are developing EU ecolabel criteria. Then we also provide very specific criteria or recommendations on how you can implement them when you want to buy the specific product group. And they try to reduce the time they spend on developing those criteria. They wanted to have also an inventory of ecolabels that you can use, but this idea has been not followed up because they found it difficult to maintain the list of the ecolabels, that they are often revised and then the ambition level changes throughout the years, and there are also legal challenges for the Commission to provide recommendations on which ecolabels you should use. There is also now an interest in focusing the research on the real impacts of the implementation of green public procurement, to see really what is the uptake that we have and what are the barriers for implementing the criteria that the Commission is providing to the different member states. So there is an upcoming research in this direction. There is also the development of a tool on life cycle costing for green public procurement of energy consuming products. So they want to see the overall cost throughout the life cycle of the product, because the investments can be bigger at the purchasing stage, but overall there can be savings which need to be also demonstrated. And the Commission at the Green Public Procurement Advisory Group also mentioned this network of NGOs, and they alerted the member states that they may be contacted by NGOs of this network, as we are considering regional and local activities. There is also something key, that now green public procurement criteria will no longer be able to refer to Energy Star because there is the agreement with the US has expired, and so they try to develop a new energy label for monitors by 2020, and in the meantime there will be a gap. They also mentioned the public procurement for a circular economy guide, which will be presented afterwards, and it will be translated in different languages. They also address the issue of single-use plastics. So they presented the initiative, of the legal initiative that the Commission has proposed on banning certain single-use plastics or regulating them through the extended producer responsibilities. But they also encourage the member states to consider these elements when they do public procurement. Finally, well, this is not so much about circular procurement, but there is also an interest from the GPP to go into more sustainable public procurement and in introducing social aspects, which at the moment is still a challenge because the indicators are less easy to address, and there are also legal problems linked to the public procurement directive. So they are undertaking a number of workshops, and they are also developing a social guide, and if you have good examples about that, they welcome them. They also, on the side of member states, so the different member states provided a highlight of things that they are doing through this regular report. So member states that are looking into the procurement of sustainable woods, other member states considering life cycle costing, the price of green products. There is also, I found very interesting, in Italy, they are looking into how you can integrate green public procurement in the EU structural funds, for example. Another experience which was very interesting was in Finland, the new competence center on sustainable public procurement, which is now a network of all the multiple organizations that were doing public procurement before in Finland, and they have come together to develop roadmaps for sustainable public procurement and in innovation and in standardize this practice. And finally, they are looking also into moving from the general implementation to a more sectorial-based approach. This is an example from the Netherlands, which is also trying to monitor what is the impact of green public procurement, because politicians are supportive of the idea, but they also want to have numbers on what is this achieving. And what they have done is that they have developed a methodology to assess different samples of tenders by product group and analyze and extrapolate and quantify the effects that those tenders can have in the environment. So far, they started with a product group like workwear, electricity, solar panels, gas, traveling, company cars, and transport services, and they have seen the effect on climate, which you can see is one of the most advanced. Then bio-based, circular economy is not so much developed in the different tenders. It's as you can see. And then social aspects are still not very mature. So the intention is to go further and to add more categories of product groups that can be even more relevant for circular economy, to obtain data to measure those, and also to develop this methodology cooperating with other member states. I also have included in the presentation that you can see afterwards an experience shared recently by Germany on a platform that they have advising on ecolabels that can be used for when you are doing public procurement. This platform is very interesting because you can find also videos and tutorials on how to implement public procurement, and there is also a map with best practices in Germany around public procurement, so you can navigate it. I will skip this slide, but you can see on the UN One Planet network that they are also working to enhance the indicator for green public procurement connected to number 12, and I put some links there on materials and that you can find in this network. Regarding the next or the ongoing product groups, we are working on data centers, public space maintenance, and imaging equipment, which are going to be finalized by mid or end of 2019. And then the upcoming product groups will be computers, office buildings, transport, and they want to add 3 new products that will be linked to the EU Ecolabel criteria development. Regarding the experience of Copenhagen that I found very interesting in this meeting of the GPP advisory group, they have developed now a new strategy that they buy for the different product groups and services that they have in their portfolio. They look for eco-labeled products. The politicians see that this is a way to also start the circular economy and to support the broader policy goals of the city in regards to the mobility, clean air, sustainable food, but also in connection to the global commitments of the Sustainable Development Goals. So they prioritize buying eco-labels because the eco-labels have a life cycle perspective, which is consider the total environmental impact of the product. And actually, eco-labels are also a signpost for the circular economy, since we are addressing a number of important issues in the different stages of the product life. And so the criteria are also ambitious, and they are regularly revised by the experts. And so they have prioritized the Danish, the Nordics one, and the EU Ecolabel, but there are also other type 1 labels that are buying. So what they did was to establish 4 categories the first one, the first and the second category are those categories where you have more availability of products, and the third and the fourth category is the ones where you have few or not so much. So for category 1 and category 2, it is a minimum demand that the product, when they buy it, it has to be eco-labeled. And for category 3 and category 4, what they do is that they set award criteria, and then they also actually, now from the 1st of November, this rule will have to apply each time. And what they did for the categories 3 and 4, and this is what I found very interesting and I wanted to share with you, is that they do also market engagement. So they tell the market, the sector, for example, now they started with toys and furniture, and they have meetings with those producers, and they tell them, we are going to ask for this criteria in 1 or 2 years, and it will be an award criteria. So they start some sort of competition between them. They also want to measure the impact of the effect on the environment of the different products that they are trying to buy, but they have limitations in terms of the data, how to measure the impact. They try to obtain it, but they are finding it difficult so far. And finally, there was also an initiative for the Danish Food Procurement Network that I found very interesting as another example of when you don't have something available on the market, how you can develop this market engagement. For example, in 2006, they were only at 45% of organic food. Now they are at 90% sorry, it went back. Anyway, sorry. So what they wanted to do, for example, for halal organic meat, what they did was to tell also 1 year in advance that the producers would get extra points, and now they managed to buy it. So they are giving these points for the different aspects that they find difficult, like seasonal or diversified vegetables, or they also divide the contracts to get into smaller, more specialized lots. And for the future, they also want to go into, or they are working already with all, not only the public administration, but they are doing also corporate public procurement, because they involve also the hospitals and private companies to have a dialogue with them and to try to work all in the same direction. So I also inserted a link where you can learn more about this experience in the slides. And that's all. Sorry, that's going on the other direction. So that's all from us.
Thank you so much, Blanca Morales. This was very useful. Also to give a bit of an overview on GPP and then also links to circular economy. I think it's also good that you showed that implementing green public procurement or circular public procurement, this is not something isolated, but very much linked to European policies, strategies, targets, but also about the global targets like the Sustainable Development Goals and localizing them. I think that's very important, and there's lots of opportunities that you showcased. I look at the clock and I see it's like 12:10. I know that one of the speakers, Werle from Flanders, has to leave in 5 minutes. Werle, maybe before you leave, just thinking about the presentations we heard so far, is there any thought that came to your mind? Otherwise, what I would like to ask you before you leave, if you could, just on what we heard, like give some feedback how this is done in Flanders with regards to the monitoring framework or the social part within your project. And finally, one thought that I also thought, is there any engagement also with the regions or countries or public authorities outside Flanders? I don't know, in other countries.
Yes. First, I just want to reply to Blanca because the ecolabels is okay, is a good sign to start with, but the biggest problem with ecolabels is that circular procurement is about a process, and you should think about the whole process. So if you have a well-designed product that is completely eco-labeled, but you throw it into the fire afterwards, then it's not a circular product or a circular procurement. It wasn't a circular procurement. So, for example, reuse is being held back with eco-labels because it hasn't got an eco-label. So that is a really important aspect, that circular procurement is larger than just green procurement, because you need to focus on the whole process. You need to ask your supplier, will you take back my products when I don't need them anymore? And what will you do with it? Will you burn them, or will you reuse them? Will you upgrade them? Will you recycle them? So that's just an important remark on the specific topic of the eco-labels.
May I reply or just share my thoughts?
If it's very short, because
very short, because in fact, yeah. Just, I completely agree with Verle. I think it is a fair point that eco-label is not the only solution, that you have to consider other aspects in the process. But if you are buying new, then the requirements of the eco-label allows you then to have a repairability of the product afterwards, or they can also be better extracted, the different parts, and recuperate the critical materials, and there is also testing for durability. So fully agree that it's not about new products only, there are other aspects, but the point here in buying eco-label is that when it is new products, and also considering the future life of those products. So both strategies need to work together as well.
Yeah, that's why we had 5 ambitions, and one is on reuse, etc. also. So it's not only the eco-labels. It's one important thing, but it's not the only thing. And for your question on Europe, we are in the Urban Agenda Circular Economy, and we are also working on together with the Urban Agenda on public procurement. So we are trying to make sure that circular principles are integrated in the projects on public procurement. But for me, or for us in Flanders, it's really important that we don't only focus on the public part, because for a company it's just as difficult to integrate circular proceedings or circular thinking in the procurement. And so you can learn a lot together, doing it together, and it's a pity that it's often divided, either public, either private.
Well, then it's since you have to leave, well, a big thank you for your presentation.
If anyone has questions for me, they can send them to me, and then we can talk on the phone or by email.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Then we will take any questions and forward them to you. Is it also fine for you that we can share your PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I will send it to you.
Perfect. Yeah, if you send it to Juliana, we can also put it on our web link. We will send it around. Then thank you very much, Verle.
Okay. Goodbye.
Good luck. Certainly stay in touch. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And then we pass on to the next presentation before we then open up for some discussions. And it's really just a short presentation by my colleague Ashley, who is Ashley McLennan, who is one of the co-authors of this European guidance that has mentioned by Blanca Morales. It's basically the guidance on circular economy in public procurement. And I asked Ashley kindly to present it a bit, just to tell you a bit in a few minutes what's in there and what is it about, because at the last annual network meeting, some of you mentioned this guidance, and I remember, like, for instance, the Portuguese partner is also considering to lay out the buying green guidance, including some circular elements. So I think it's good, and we are very glad, Ashley, that you have the time to just tell us a bit about that guidance. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Peter, and hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, as Peter said, I've been asked to end this webinar today with a very short overview of the brochure, and maybe I can share my screen now. Yep. Okay, yeah, and yeah, this is something that ECLI was commissioned to do last year by DG Environment, and really the goal of it was to compile one document where all of the emerging ideas about what circular procurement is, some initial examples of that, to bring them together into one place. So, since its publication, it's been translated into 5 additional languages: French, German, Italian, Polish, and Spanish. And all of these can be found on DG Environment's website under Green Public Procurement. And there's also a link to this in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And yeah, you can understand the brochure as having 2 main goals. The first is to try and help you understand how different products can be made more circular when you're procuring. And the second is looking at how different procurement mechanisms can help you achieve that. So yeah, as I said, the first part is to really focus on thinking strategically about how to be more circular and identify points at which you can make products more sustainable and more circular. And you might recognize the framework that we use for this. It's an expanded version of the waste hierarchy. So when you're thinking about a purchase, it encourages you to first rethink whether there's a need for a purchase at all, and whether asset sharing is possible, whether there's the resources already available in the organization which you can use. Next, it's about reducing the resources used. Can you eliminate single-use items? Is it possible to reduce the overall amount of materials that you require? Third, really important, is encouraging reuse. This is kind of key to establishing a sort of high-value resource and energy-minimizing circular economy. And there's several cases now of this being used really effectively in furniture and textiles. Recycling, we've talked about this in earlier presentations. It's not a fully circular option, but it is still a good option for products which cannot be avoided and cannot be reused. The example that we use in the brochure is actually of concrete in Berlin, and that's a really interesting case. And finally, recovery of energy and nutrients. That's obviously a much more specific and limited strategy, but it can be used in really interesting ways, such as capturing biogas from sewage plants and powering a bus fleet on it, which is what they're actually doing in Vasa in Finland right now. So yeah, at every step throughout the brochure, there's case studies presented where people are actually already doing this in cities and different public authorities across Europe. And then in the next half of the brochure, we really look more at how to do circular procurement. A lot of this will be familiar to those already involved in green public procurement, so engaging with the market, setting appropriate specifications and award criteria, how you evaluate your tenders, and again, at each of these points there's a case study presented. And then there's also a section on improving the in-use phase and the contract management phase of purchasing, which is more important in circular than perhaps your usual sustainable public purchasing approach, because it goes beyond encouraging sustainable products, and it's also about looking at how you can support a circular business model to be established. So that might sound like quite a lot of information to take in, but I've just put this screenshot from part of the brochure on this slide, just to demonstrate that it's quite short, it's accessible, and there's case studies at each point. And also at the end of the brochure, for anyone interested in taking those next steps to being more circular in your procurement, there's a list of additional resources. And just to point out a couple others while we're here, the EU GPP criteria is a really excellent resource. A lot of people don't know it exists, and the most recent updates to this, including textiles and furniture, are starting to include more circular principles, so it's always worth looking there for the newest updated guidance when you're thinking about circular. The Sustainable Procurement Platform Resource Centre, this is a site where we're collecting sustainable procurement reports, case studies, and other resources. And we also have a search function there where you can look at circular procurement. And finally, we have our EcoProcure conference coming up in October. It's in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, so it's kind of the home of circular procurement at the moment, and it's a really hot topic. So if you're able to come to EcoProcure, then it's going to be a really good chance to learn and exchange with other practitioners who are getting started in this area. So I think that's everything from me. Thanks for listening. It's a very quick overview, but I hope it's given you some next steps if you're interested in finding out more. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, or you can contact me later with my email address, which is on the slide. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for this useful presentation. Indeed, because I've been working for quite many years now for ICLE on the public procurement, and I'm always surprised that in many projects when they start, I realize that procurers still, in many parts of Europe, they're not aware on what's up there being developed by DG Environment together with other stakeholders in terms of specific product groups, criteria, and it's also translated in all languages. So it's always good to showcase that there is information there, and procurers are not left alone there trying to reinvent the wheel on this circular procurement or what could be circular criteria or green criteria for a certain product. But we have just a bit of time, a few minutes left. Are there any questions, smart thoughts, circular thoughts about from any participant or panelists? Then it's your time. You can either raise the hand or write the question, and then Juliana can unmute you or read the question.
Hi, Mervyn, you raised your hand. I just unmuted you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on what Ashley was just saying there about, again, links into the point I was making, that when we're talking about using procurement to become more circular, it's recognizing where we're starting from. And in many different countries, as has been shown throughout the seminar today and looking at all the case studies, we're all starting from very different points. The key bit is about taking the next steps towards becoming more circular. And that means thinking in a more circular way, as I was mentioning in my presentation. Thinking at the start, it might not be that you can have a single contract that can cover the whole life cycle of a product or the service that you're procuring, for example, a building, but you can still think about the consequences of what you're procuring at the initial stage in terms of challenging the need, in terms of understanding what the market can offer, and in terms of understanding what might happen at the end of first life. So that picks up on the point I think that Ashley was making, that recycling in itself is a good sustainable option. It's about using recycling, if that's the starting point about thinking about getting waste out of landfill, using recycling as a way of then creating a more closed loop approach. And I mentioned the example that the Dutch did with their textiles, their uniforms for their lock keepers. They looked at the opportunity there to use recycling as a driver to create recycled fibres that could then be woven back into new corporate uniforms for their lock keepers. So, yeah, it's about where you start from. It doesn't necessarily all mean that we've all got to start at the same point. It's looking at what the next step, the next opportunity is.
Thank you, Marvin. I think that's a very important point, because also, as you usually say, and you're very active in this field on circular economy and procurement, it's about posing the right questions. And I think this is something easier said than done, because all of us, particularly when working on procurement, we are used to have all these catalogs, all these criteria, whether they're basic or advanced, on what is a green product. But it's not that easy to think functionally, okay, the chair, how should it look like? But simply asking the question, well, the first function is sitting comfortably or like this and leaving it up to the market. This transformation also of the thinking, I think, which is not that easy. But are there any other questions? Also thoughts? Okay, then if there are no other questions, I think we can.
Hi, Peter. I think Stefan raised this.
Stefan, okay, please, Stefan.
Yeah, Stefan Arditi from EV. I'm going to make a bit of a provocative question at the end. Is just to, for me, bear in mind that I would say target setting is a very powerful instrument to get to a certain result. And I was wondering how the network would consider campaigning for more binding targets with regard GPP, because it's been an issue discussed now for years that we've got an indicative target that about 50% of the public procurement should be green, and according to what I've projected already in 2011, we were quite close to this target, but I'm not sure it's so meaningful. So I was wondering what's the network, I would say, position with regard making more binding the greening of public procurement, a bit like it exists in Italy. So it does not mean that necessarily we should go for the greener offer, because of course there is always, from a procurement point of view, the cost aspect, but that means that no tender should be in a way considered if they are not green criteria as part of the assessment. So, and I know it's kind of provocative because we've tried several times in the energy performance, energy efficiency directive or things like this to set mandatory green public procurement, and we failed. So maybe some of you.
I think your point is very valid. I mean, in a formal way, I could tell you that the project coordination is, in our case, is all in Italian hands, and you know that Enrico De Giorgis from the Commission is also from Italy, so we are all from the country where it is mandatory, where there are minimum green criteria, and I think we also like to show that example that it's possible. There are some countries where there are partly some criteria are mandatory, and you know, when they translated the 2014 procurement directives, they included some mandatory parts as well. And we have an NGO from Vienna, for instance, where you know that the eco-buy criteria for the different catalogs of products, they are also mandatory. But apart from that, it's not that we can, let's say, have a position, but I think what we definitely try to do is like, yeah, to push for it, because there's always a discussion. If you know it's a voluntary instrument, we also know that some countries, or let's say public authorities, some cities, they've been good for many years now, 10, 15, 20 years on green public procurement, but there are many others where it's still about the cheapest price, although the new directives encourage to look at the most economically advantageous product. I think it's work in progress, but I feel like also seeing these active NGOs in our project here, and also just for the others that they do not know, I mean, all these NGOs, many they start now in this last phase of the project, and also to do their activities and to promote the GPP, and I think there it is definitely also good to showcase the importance to be a bit more outspoken here, to trying to push mandatory or not. That's not in our competence to decide, but I think in order to reach these targets, we should somehow make quite a jump forward. But I'm happy if there are any other thoughts.
Nikolai also, I think, wanted to intervene and just unmute him. Nikolai, hi.
Oh, thank you. Actually, thank you to all presenters. It was really very useful to discuss. Hello?
Yes,
we can hear.
because the connection was not very good, probably I will try to see again the recording afterward. And I just want to ask if all the presentations also will be available to download.
Yes, yes, they will. We will send the recording and the presentations through, and we will put them up online as well. So you'll find them online, and we'll send them by email.
Okay, thank you.
Well, then it's 12:30, 3 minutes more. Thank you all very much. I don't want to hold you on, but I think it was really 4 very different presentations. But we heard a lot of information to digest, and this, since it's recorded and the presentation will be on our website that Juliana can then send around the link, you can rehear it and reread it. Thanks a lot also to the presenters who on short notice prepared the presentations and shared their knowledge with us. And hopefully this was also then very useful for the NGO network participants to use it in their daily work and in their work with public authorities on green public procurement or circular public procurement, so that we all help to transform this procurement and transform this way in circular thinking towards products, towards consumption and production. So thank you all. Have a good day, and be aware that the next webinar will be in October, and that topic will be most likely on avoiding greenwash, how to verify GPP commitments in tender and contracts. It will be our legal expert here in this project, Abby Sample, that some of you have met at our last network meeting. She was also one of the co-authors of the Buying Green Guidance, and she will moderate that session. So all the best, and good luck for your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.